being no other candidates presented, I duly declare them elected as church wardens for the following year, and may God have mercy on your souls. But in all seriousness, a good thanks to Sarah and to Tim for being willing to take on this role for you. It's a vital one to our church, and I'm greatly indebted to them. That being the end of the vestry meeting business, we close that and move straight on to the annual parochial church meeting. So we start with the report on the church electoral roll, of which there has been, as far as I can tell, no changes, remaining at 79 members for the church for the year ahead. Minutes of the annual vestry meeting, annual parochial church meeting, held on the 18th of May 2025. I trust you've had a chance to read those. Are you happy that they are a due record of that meeting? I can't remember what happened, but they all seem to go well. Any matters arising from that? Marvellous. Moving swiftly on down to my report for the year. So as I think I say every year, it always feels very strange to be writing a report which is technically meant to be focused on the last year, when we're already nearly halfway into the new, and so much of our church life has moved on. Yet it is good to take a moment to kind of pause and to reflect, to give thanks for all that's gone well, and to consider just what comes next. So as always, it's right to begin with some gratitude, really. Firstly, to all those who carry a lot of responsibility for life in this church, to our ministry team, to Laura, Mike, Peter and Sophie, who each contribute so much of themselves in different ways to make this church work and flourish. To give thanks to Tim as church warden, who's made, frankly, superhuman efforts over the last year to care for this church. He's been the rock that upholds much of our common life and much of our common building, and I'd be very adrift without him. To John as PCC secretary, who with his usual wry elan has guided us through many interesting situations this year with an authoritative grip, as always, on the church representation rules, which is well appreciated. John does want to step down from this role, so we are going to be looking for a replacement PCC secretary, which is a tough act to follow, though. If you are interested in that, it's a vital role. Do speak to me. It'd be good to hear from you. I want to thank our wider standing committee and PCC, who have done an excellent job in managing the kind of disparate and complex parts of life that come with being the trustee, looking after an ancient parish and a parish church that is large, complex and not logically wired, you could say. That is a big demand. I'm very grateful to all those who've made contributions. Thanks to Helen, who filled in for much of 2025 as temporary administrator, making sure that things kept ticking over in the office, and then to Justine, who took over in December and is shaping the job in her very own distinctive way. Big thanks must also be said to Katie, who's been a wonderful interim director of music, stepping in to fill William's shoes when he and Sally left. And has done a sterling work, and I'm sure will enjoy having a rest when Tom begins in August. Also thanks to Yiming, who has been superb asset on the organ and on the piano, and whose talents we will miss very much when he leaves us. More widely, can I just say thank you to all of you. In so many different ways, you all kind of individually and collectively contribute to this church and to its life, filling rotas, offering hospitality, decorating the building, preparing for services, offering pastoral care, reading in church, leading prayers, helping maintain the building, helping deal with some of the paperwork, giving lifts to those who need it, making coffee, a key skill I'm very convinced of, and most of the time just simply noticing one another and the needs and what's going on and offering help. This church is very much sustained by a quiet, faithful commitment by so many people. In fact, this church really only works because so many of you just get on with it, and that is something that we need to give thanks for massively. It's not something you can reproduce or replace. It is the sort of irreplaceable asset at the heart of our church, and so thank you for all you do. 2025 was, in many ways, an encouraging and good year for our church. There were certainly some challenges, some significant, some quite unexpected. But alongside them, I think, has been a sense and a feeling that there is evidence of steady life and steady growth in this place. Our worship has remained at the heart of who we are as a parish. All the Sunday services, the stream worship, the midweek gatherings, evensong, breakfast church, all those services we've put on at Advent, at Christmas, for Lent and for Holy Week. They've all been held with care and with faithfulness. Particularly Easter and Christmas were well attended. We didn't do anything particularly new, exciting or dynamic in the last year, but what we did seemed to connect with people, seemed to work well and to feel good. That's a lot. That's important because that's the heart of who we are and what we are about. We can't lose sight of that. We've continued to see alongside that encouraging growth with work with children and families. Breakfast Church, Bumps and Babies, Toddler Praise, and various other groups have been bringing new people into this building, but also creating relationships with them so they feel known and cared for in this place, and that's been a significant thing. There is a growing sense that we are a place which can accompany people at their early stages of life and or faith, where they can find some belonging and a sense that they matter, and that's a really important thing to build on. Our wider pastoral and community life remains strong. Lichgate lunches, Natta, the home groups, bereavement support lunches, and all those countless informal networks we have of care and friendship continue week by week, and they are irreplaceable. Most of what happens in our church actually isn't really visible if you just come on a Sunday morning, but there is a huge amount going on in this place through the week by a huge number of people, which makes a real difference, and that is something to celebrate. We do continue to serve our wider community as well. We work with many local schools, leading assemblies, collective workshops, teaching on key RE topics. We also are able to host here the Schools Festival, connecting large numbers of children into the life of this place, which is a wonderful thing to do. Alongside this, we continue to be able to use our assets to support those who are in need, forming partnerships and resources with Bromley Relief in Need, with WellCare, with Hope Interaction in Bromley, with Bromley Citizens, with Bromley Homeless. We are, as a church, one of the key assets in this area that can make things happen by lending our space, our money, our time and resources. Many of those initiatives wouldn't be happening without this church, and that's a really valuable thing to be able to do, and it does make a difference. So looking at the church as a whole, I think over the last year we feel much more rooted, more confident, more clear, I think, about who we are as a church and a community, what we do and why. We are more reflective of the community in which we are placed, more diverse, more open, and I hope genuinely more welcome. People do come and talk to me again and again and again of the warmth of welcome they get in this church when they turn up, which is a key marker, just the general health of our life and community. You may remember about 3 years ago at the APCM, I spoke about a key vision about wanting us to be a church that's warm and welcoming, that's thoughtful and serious in worship, that's grounded in real life, committed to prayer but also to practical action. That vision feels like something we're no longer just aiming at a distance, but that we're already beginning to inhabit and live in different ways, and that's really encouraging. Of course, always at the centre of that remains the importance of our worship. Everything else flows from that, or should do, and we need to hold that in our minds when we look to the future. Alongside all the encouraging things, there are challenges and realities which we need to be honest about. The pressures of maintaining the building through 2025, maintaining our infrastructure, have been particularly pressing. We've had vandalism that year with the windows, water leaks, boiler issues, significant repair work that has been needed, which has taken a lot of time, a lot of energy, quite a lot of money to solve. And we do owe a great deal of thanks to those who often shoulder that and dealing with the complexities of the building and of insurance, and thanks particularly to Tim and Helen who've done a lot with that. The life of our church and here has shifted a lot. We've been glad to welcome Justine. It was lovely to see Laura continue to grow in her ministry here. She was ordained priest last Petertide. We look forward in a few months to welcoming Tom as Director of Music and to see what changes he makes to our life. At the same time, we've said goodbye to people who've made contributions to our life together. We said goodbye to Sally and William, who gave a lot to the music and to the general pastoral life of this church. We also lost many faithful members of this congregation over the last year. Jenny Lewis, Mary Setchell, June Howard, Peggy Cham, Iris Henderson, to name but a few. And that loss is something we probably feel as we look around on a Sunday morning and think about where this church was and who is no longer with us. We also can't ignore the fact that much of what we are able to do is currently sustained by a relatively small number of people. That's not unique to any church, but it's something we need to respond to wisely as we try to look towards making sure this building and this community is sustainable for the future. Part of the tasks we have is not simply to do more, which is always a temptation, but to ensure that what we do is sustainable, is shared, and is life-giving, discerning what we can do and being realistic about the limits we have. That includes the limits of clergy time and energy. And there's always the risk that we squeeze out the things that we are called to do centrally: prayer, study, reflect, teach, and welcome, which are pushed out by other matters if we're not careful. That's a tension we need to hold together as a church and work through. To that end, the PCC back in the autumn had a vision day to begin to think, actually, where are we as a church? What are we called to be? How do we move forward perhaps more intentionally than we have been? We discussed many things, and it's still very much in the planning stage, but clearly what came out that there is a lot that is good and distinctive about this church, and a lot that we should celebrate. Would somebody like to go and just see who's at the door? The bell just rang. Thank you. We recognise that we are a church who are very much rooted in beautiful worship, in strong musical traditions. A church that values thoughtful and serious liturgy, a church where families and older members belong together in the same space. A church that seeks spiritual depth rather than something more superficial. And a church that wants to use its buildings, its people and its resources well for the sake of not just ourselves, but this town and community. If I were to draw those instincts together, it would be perhaps drawing on the idea in Acts 2. You always need to pick a Bible verse, don't you, when you think about a mission strategy. But it sounds very close to the continuing life you see of the early church in Jerusalem. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and fellowship, to the breaking of bread and the prayers. Our understanding of ourselves as a church rooted in worship, in music, committed to nurturing faith in children and adults, widening our welcome and serving our community with what God has given us seems to be where we feel we are. And from that shared understanding comes several important areas of focus which the PCC will be looking at to develop. The first broad axis is that around children and young people. We're fortunate enough already to have children and families amongst us, but the task is to make sure that they develop in faith as they grow. And so we need to think about ways in which we progress from those who have younger years up into young teenagehood, helping them become confident and rooted members of this church. That means thinking about what we offer at the moment, how children are involved across our services, and what we may need to change and who we may need to lead on that as we look to develop that in the future. We talked a lot about spiritual depth and discipleship, a sense that growth must be spiritual as well as numerical. We want to create clearer ways for people to engage in prayer, with scripture, with Christian learning at every stage of life. That may include things like starting new home groups, offering further opportunities for study, developing a more intentional cycle of teaching through the year, and creating opportunities for prayer, for healing days, for quiet days. The Bible course, which I talked about in the notices, is the next phase in that, trying to build a series of things we can engage with through the year if there is interest. Then there was questions about welcome and our communication. We want to be clear in saying that we're here and what we're doing and what we are about, and stronger in how we welcome people to this place, helping people to belong, not just turn up. I'm very pleased to say that our new church website has been built. It exists. We were trained on it on Tuesday, and so now there comes the work to refine the content, to update some of the images. The newest image on the model we have at the moment is of me from 7.5 years ago, which is not necessarily the look we want for the church. So there will be a period of time refining that, getting it right, rebuilding and rewording, and then we'll be ready to launch it hopefully in the next month or so. Alongside that, we want to improve communication channels. We've got the weekly email, and think about how perhaps we can use that slightly more, how we can increase the ways in which it's obvious how we need people to help in this church, and easy way for people to know just who is who dealing with what in the life of our church. We thought a lot about our plant, our buildings, our outreach. We are undoubtedly blessed with buildings and with space, and the opportunities we have are great in ensuring we use them well to serve our mission and purposes, supporting community life, having outreach, offering hospitality. There is a group currently looking at our garden of remembrance and how it might be expanded in a way that not only gives us extra capacity for ashes, but also greatly enhances our churchyard in offering a place which is there for reflection and guidance in life. More broadly, we want to continue improving the church grounds as a community asset, and to try and increase the number of community-focused events that we offer. Perhaps most importantly, with all of this, we recognise we can't exhaust ourselves trying to do it all. The future depends on building structures that support clergy and volunteers alike and help us to focus on what matters the most. These priorities that we have as identified as a PCC hopefully point towards a hopeful and realistic direction, not just doing more and more and more, but doing things clearer, sustainably, and with an understanding of why, and that will play into future staffing decisions in this church. We do know we need to look at an organist and possibly a children and young people's worker. So looking back over the year and looking forward as the PCC develops practically what this vision means, I just want to reiterate that we are a church where there is a huge amount to celebrate. There are challenges and we are stretched in many ways. But the challenge, as with all things, is not to try and become something else or something different, but to become more fully ourselves as a community here in Bromley. And to remember that beneath everything else that there is, beyond the activities, the challenges, the buildings, the meetings, the most important things always remain steady and present at the heart of who we are. Our worship, our prayer, the friendship and service we offer here, the generosity of people, and the faith that points towards. That's the foundation of what we do, and that's what we point towards and build on as we go forward in the years ahead. That being said, one of the things about thinking about mission and our outreach is the state of our finances and the money we have to enable these things to happen. So Becky's going to come and take us through the financial statements and tell us just how much money is left in the bank.
Excellent, thank you. Hopefully everyone can hear me. I can't see anyone because it's very, very bright, but we will continue anyway. Excellent. So everyone should have a lovely set of financial accounts. The first pages are John's excellent review of the year, where obviously James has just taken us through the highlights. And so I would ask you to turn initially to page 10 and the statement of financial accounts. So including our parochial organisations, our total incoming resources in 2025 was £297,820. That was an increase of just under 10% on 2024's 271,245. The majority of that increase was driven by some one-off income in relation to legacies and a restricted donation in relation to the memorial garden that we received in 2025. To go through these things in more detail, if you can switch to page 16 and note 2, which heads into a lot more detail. Excellent. I don't even need to say next slide, please. It's very impressive. So our donations and legacies is made up of 4 key elements. We have our planned giving, which is the fair shares income. That decreased by 11%, so £6,402 to £52,137 in 2025, due to the loss of some long-standing members. As you can see, our planned giving had quite a significant increase in 2023 following the giving campaign, but has now started to fall. I would say encouragingly in the first quarter of 2026 we have maintained at the same level as last year, so that's quite reassuring at the moment. The 30,675 legacy received in 2025 was from the estate of Margaret Elves, and that was along with the collection raised in memory of Lynn Hedges. And in 2024, in comparison, we received a 10,000 legacy from the estate of Jack Mountford. The 5,939 increase in sundry donations relates mainly to the increase of the 15,000 restricted donation we received for the Memorial Garden, and that was offset by some decreases in the income we received in relation to special collections, starter packs, the meals project, things like that. Overall, other trading activities has seen little movement, with the 2,669 increase in car parking, thanks to the sterling efforts of Sam Salmons, being offset by the decrease in solar energy income, and that was because we had a bumper receipt in 2024 after we actually repaired the photovoltaic cells and made a claim. Next slide, please. Thank you. I'm going to cover both our kind of rental and investment income and expenditure together. So you will see the income at the bottom of note 2 and the costs of that income in note 3. So our rental income and interest and dividend income amounted to £151,772. The related costs, which are set out in note 3, came to £45,642. St Paul's House continues to provide a steady income of about £90,000 per year, with a depreciation charge of £3,700. We made a change in 2025 to move some of the investment we have at CCLA from being reinvested as we receive dividend income to actually receiving that dividend income. And that resulted in our interest and dividend income increasing to £15,430. For the rooms and youth centre, we had quite a significant increase, about 6,500 more than the prior year, coming to 27,526. It's fair to say some of the invoicing fell behind in 2024, so some of that related to timing, moving things into 2025. In comparison, we had costs of £1,600 in relation to depreciation and £15,917, which was just a bit lower than 2024, of the costs of insurance, heating, cleaning, maintenance, and very fortunately our insurance covered the vast bulk of the costs in relation to the windows vandalism. Our income from Rochester Avenue was 9,509, which was just under £6,000 lower than 2024 because we had a void period when the tenants moved out and we did some refurbishment work. And that compared to our costs in relation to Rochester Avenue of 2,461 for the depreciation and 18,960 for all the refurbishment works that we carried out. Homestead Road, in contrast, we had the same 8,400 income from Hope into Action as in 2024. Moving on to other expenditure, keep your finger on page 16, flip back to page 10 briefly. You can see that expenditure is split between raising funds, which I've just covered, and charitable activities. And we had a slight 1.5% increase in our overall expenditure last year, moving it to 286,617, which was mainly driven by those costs of the refurbishment work at Rochester Avenue, being offset by some reductions in relation to the ministry of the church, particularly where we had staff vacancies. If we flip back again to the notes, and if you go on to page 17 and note 4, this has the bulk of the work that we actually carried out in the church. Excellent. So overall cost of the ministry of the church has decreased by 11,172 against 2024. And as I said, that was very significantly driven by the vacancies we had for our parish administrator and our music director and various other roles. So our support costs, which you'll see 3 times separately against each of the individual lines, that is the cost that we have to pay to have the accounts independently examined, and that came to £4,380 in 2025. The church running expenses include administration, insurance, cleaning, utilities, sanctuary requisites, etc., and the 6,626 decrease compared to 2024 was due to the parish administrator vacancy. Similarly, our music costs decreased by about the same amount, again due to the music director vacancy, and then we had an increase of 2,861 on our outreach costs, which relates to expenditure on partly on starter packs and meals network and a couple of other things. Our repairs and maintenance work decreased by 6,770. That was mainly because there were some significant works on the roof and tower that took place in 2024. Moving on. This just tries to look at what our key costs are in terms of the ministry of the church and kind of try and give you an idea of the scale. In 2025, it cost us £572 per day to run our church. Again, moving on, please. Oh, check that. I can't tell the difference in the slides. That's at the... I saw a circle. I thought it was the previous slide. There we go. So note 4 also shows our total away giving, which was £12,832 in 2025. Our non-restricted away giving amounted to 4,857, which includes the amounts we give every year to Bromley Wellcare and to the Town Centre Church. On page 24 of the accounts, you'll find the details of the restricted away giving, which in total was £6,516, a decrease from 2024 because there was some elements in relation to the meals network then, and it shows our 3 charities that we supported in 2024, which were Bromley Relief in Need, Poverty and Hope Appeal, and CALM, which is the Campaign Against Living Miserably. So if we now turn back to page 10, you will see we have unrealised investment fund loss of 4,659, which is the movement in the value of our funds that are held at the CCLA between the 31st of December 2024 and the 31st of December 2025. It's fair to say the stock market has been very volatile due to world events, and it continues to be. So we've seen kind of bouncing around between gains and losses over the last few years, but we are still generally heading in a positive direction. Including this unrealised loss, the net gain before transfers amounted to £6,544. Without that, we would have actually made a gain of £11,204 for 2025. The transfers between funds include the 5% contribution transferred from general funds to restricted away giving. And overall, that brings us to an overall fund balance for 2025 of £1,247,698. If you flip over on to the next page, you will see the balance sheet, and that sets out how those funds are essentially allocated. Our tangible assets of 221,462 are the Youth Centre, Rochester Avenue and Hamilton Road, along with our audiovisual equipment. It's fair to say those are not valued at current market value. We are, as a small charity, we don't have to value those every year, so we're quite fortunate for that. Our investment property of 181,074 relates to St Paul's House, and again is an accounting figure only. The investment figure of the 275,918 is the funds that we hold at the CCLA, and again has dropped slightly due to that unrealised loss in the year. Our cash balance of 446,343 is 30,572 higher than the prior year, due to the short-term debtors balance dropping and also the surplus that we actually made in the year. And then if you want to look in great detail, we have 2 pages 22 in the accounts. We got a little bit happy with the numbering this year. But on those, you will see our notes 10 and 11. And those go through in detail how all those funds are actually allocated. I've provided a summary on the slides. Key points to note are that our general fund balance is now at 12,352. It moved into surplus in 2024 for the first time since 2020, and we've managed to maintain that, which is quite encouraging. The slight decrease reflects the fact that most of the elements of income in 2025 related to our legacies and restricted donations, and you'll see those as you go down the fund balances. And I think that was my whirlwind tour of our accounts. I am very happy to take any questions, noting the fact that I can't actually see anyone. Are there any waving hands, James, or have I stunned everyone into silence?
Well, if there's no questions, I only say thank you, Becky. As always, it's an immensely incredible job you're doing looking after the finances, and I think we'll forgive you trying to present them like a rock star in your glasses indoors.
I don't know how you manage it. It's so bright. I can't, yeah, it is way too bright.
But again, once again, thank you to Becky for all we do, and you know, the headlines are we do need to be careful with what we've got, but we've got a lot to share about, which is a good thing. I believe the only other thing on finances we technically need to do as the APCM is reappoint our independent examiners for the year. Do we not? Have they taken it from the... Right, that's fine. Well, who's realistically going to change them anyway? They do a great job. Fantastic. Have you nixed my agenda, Becky? suppose I'll let you off because of the pie charts. Okay, so we come now to elections for various posts within the church. So we have, firstly, this is a year where we elect to our Deanery Synod. We're able to elect 2 representatives for the church on the Deanery Synod, and we have 2 nominations for that post. Becky Chantry, nominated by Sue Cox, seconded by Peter Cheshire, and Mike Cox, nominated by Becky Chantry and seconded by Alan Hughes. There being no other candidates and 2 spaces, I declare them duly elected to the joys of the Deanery Synod for another 3 years. Then we have election to the PCC. We have just 1 nomination for this year, which is Duncan McGill, nominated by Peter Cheshire and seconded by Anne Horner-Tree. And so Duncan is likewise elected to serve for a term of 3 years on the PCC. Now we've re-elected Becky to the Deanery Synod. We do have a Deanery Synod report, so you can hear about the exciting meetings that you've not been able to go to and what's going on in the wider life of the Deanery.
Right, thank you. So the Deanery Synod met 3 times during the year, and our lay reps last year, obviously myself and Jonathan Hutton. So the July 2025 meeting, we had updates from some parishes on basically the things that they're doing that they want to highlight to the rest of the deanery. So it's trying to bring some good news and share things that are actually working and succeeding. So we had the revival of Messy Church at St Augustine's with St Luke's, some unexpected interest from some young adults at Christ Church Bromley, some community-focused outreach at St Mary Hayes, and again, new young people engaging at Christ Church Chislehurst. Then we also had a good discussion on what kind of our future discussion topics could be at Deanery Synod and what people would find helpful, including topics like how we can use social media, safeguarding, publicity and volunteer management. We then also had an update on the Bromley Citizens Initiative, and Synod was also informed that the lay chair role was vacant. Then the November 2025 meeting, I decided that I would volunteer, and I have now been confirmed as the lay chair of the Deanery Synod, because I'm not busy enough, clearly. The area dean then focused on new diocesan growth targets and encouraged members and to explore further details online. We had, again, that kind of update on kind of what the whole diocese plan is going to be. The parishes, again, their updates included some renewed youth engagement following confirmation at St Nicholas's, whereas St George's Bickley described some challenges in launching an inquirer's course, and that had some supportive discussion coming out of it. And then Christ Church Bromley outlined some plans for an upcoming mission week. So then also had a bit of a briefing on the planned launch of the Deanery Synod website. We then had quite a lot around a workshop on working with volunteers, looking at some of the challenges across parishes in recruiting, supporting and retaining people for both ministry roles and the wider work of the church. We looked at kind of spiritual motivation, pastoral care, communication, role descriptions, boundaries and accountability, and how we can have clearer structures to actually help people. And then finally, the February 2026 meeting took place at Holy Trinity Church in Bromley Common. We had a really helpful presentation from Canon Matthew Girt, the diocesan secretary, who basically went through a presentation on kind of what the diocesan office can support you in. So all the different things that the diocese actually does and the ways that parishes can actually get support that we might not have known about. And I think particularly some of the areas on communication and news media and interest and how to respond to that were particularly helpful. Then we also had 4 parishes sharing mission updates, from family outreach events at St Mary's Hayes to a prayer and a pint at Holy Trinities, which I quite liked, nice pub gathering, St John's half-term exhibition to Egypt, Holiday Club, and St Nicholas Chislehurst work on improving accessibility for people with sensory difficulties. We then again had another update on the diocesan strategy from the area dean, particularly looking at communications resources that have been circulated by the diocesan office, encouraging parishes to use them to get our congregations fully and thoroughly engaged and excited about the diocesan strategy. And then we basically had a moment of thanks for everyone who'd served on the Deanery Synod for the last 3 years, and hope that with the new elections that people will continue to be engaged in the work that happens there. There we go.
I don't think anyone's ever applauded the Deanery Synod before. That's excellent. Tim, do you want to come and talk about the fabric of the church?
Good afternoon, everyone. You should have, hopefully, a copy of or sight of two things. First of all, a written report, a commentary on the fabric report for last year, but also you should have a spreadsheet version which itemises the various things that happened initially in 2025 and then more recently than that. The purpose really of the spreadsheet, as much as anything, is to highlight, as you can see from the things that are shaded yellow, how much of this is unforeseen, things that just happen in the life of the church and the buildings and so on, which need to be acted upon very often quite quickly. 2025, first half was completely dominated by two major events. First of all, a very serious mains water leak, which had been going on for some time, unbeknown to us, and which we became increasingly aware of as the symptoms developed, and you can see the details of that in the report. That took several months to resolve, and in the end meant quite a bit of work, digging, trenching and so on, out in the driveway in order to correct the problem, which did happen. Not long after that, in fact almost overlapping with that, we had a series of vandalism attacks on the windows of the church rooms at the back on 4 separate occasions, ranging from, I think the smallest was 9 windows and the largest was 30 windows, and some of those were broken more than once because we'd had them repaired, replaced, and they were broken again. Obviously the police were involved, the insurance company were involved, and all the rest of it. But again, that went on for quite a long time and took an awful lot of work to get that sorted. Fortunately, in a way, one perpetrator, and we're not saying that he was responsible for all of this by any means, one person was caught by the police because he was careless enough to cut himself on the windows and leave a blood sample, which the police were able to use to trace him. He has been prosecuted, and I had to be a witness for that prosecution. Beyond that, you can see a whole range of other things that took place later in the year. You can see that regular reports were made to the PCC meetings every 2 months. and in the intervening months to the Standing and Finance Committee, so they were kept up to date on what was going on at that particular time. Other major works included, James has already mentioned, the gas boiler in the church rooms had to be replaced. It was in fact 18 years old, which came as a bit of a surprise to us because I think we wouldn't have guessed it was old as that, but it was. The flat roof at the top of the tower had to be properly resurfaced and sealed. The water heater in the youth centre had to be replaced. One of the hand dryers in the ladies' toilets here had to be replaced. And towards the end of the year, a new intruder alarm system was fitted in the rooms. That just failed, and because of its age, that had to be replaced. All of the usual annual servicing and safety inspections were carried out at various times. Major inspections also took place. It was quite a busy year for inspections. There was the quinquennial inspection by the diocese, by their appointed surveyor. That happens every 5 years, obviously. And that happened to be last year in June. There followed very soon after that the risk survey and insurance review, again, which doesn't take place every year at all, but that happened to be the same year. Portable appliance testing, that's all the electrical items which basically have a plug. All of those were due for testing again, and that was done. And the annual safety inspection of the gas boilers. And then towards the end of the year again, the tombs and monuments were inspected. They had been inspected, obviously, prior to this, but in a fairly ad hoc manner. This was the first time we'd undertaken a much more organised review, and I'm very grateful to Janice Roddy and to Sarah Dowling for assisting James with doing that work. So we now have a map of all the tombs and monuments in the churchyard, and from that came a number which needed some attention, which we are working on at the moment, but one in particular which was quite dangerous out near the memorial garden, and that we decided needed barrier fencing to protect anyone from being, too near to it should it fail. So that was all done. More recently still, we've had an asbestos survey of the whole site carried out, and I'm pleased to say that only one item has occurred out of that will require some attention, and that is that down in the boiler room here, where previous plumbing was changed, there was some residual asbestos left behind. So that will need attention, but given that we have serious issues with the boilers themselves, which are also very old, then probably that will all be carried out at the same time, and however we decide to replace the heating system, we will sort out that bit of asbestos at the same time. The tower clock is always something that people are very interested in because it's so visible, and certainly not just the congregation, but lots of people in Bromley do focus on that clock and like to see it working. It's been pretty good recently. PCC had made a decision some months ago that next time it failed, it probably would need a major refurbishment, which would mean taking it off-site to the workshop of the company concerned. But that hasn't proved necessary yet. It did actually stop just a while ago, but it turned out that was in fact due to somebody up in the tower had moved some boxing, and that had stopped it working. So the clock was desperately trying to do its thing and be reliable, and it was being prevented from doing that. So the engineer did attend and sort that out, but at the moment we haven't had to spend the money which the PCC had already agreed to as necessary. In addition to attending to the items identified in the quinquennial report, obviously that comes in with recommendations for the level of urgency of things that need doing. So the first of those issues have been attended to. Other projects that we have been working on include continuing to monitor drains and gullies and surface water generally. A fire risk assessment is due. That's not been done, I think, for about 5 years, so that was due. That will be happening in the next few months. And then at the last PCC meeting, right at the end, and quite rightly, someone said, can we do something about the state of the curtains in the rooms? Because they have been there, we think, since the rooms were built. They haven't, Margaret, you know. Right. Okay, so any idea how long? Right. Yes, I was going to say 20, 25 years maybe. Anyhow, the fact is the curtains... Right, the originals. Okay. Right, so they're not 1985 curtains then, but they are probably 25 years old. And although they're very good quality, they're certainly showing their age now, and in some cases the linings are ripped and they need replacing. So I'm working on that at the moment as well. Then very, very recently, we've had another kind of much more minor but nevertheless annoying outbreak of vandalism with bits of lead being cut away and stolen from the window ledges around the rooms. And that's happened 3 or 4 times in the last few weeks. Again, obviously the police have been notified, and I've got the guy who does that work for us lined up to come and sort it out. I think we've probably now reached the point where we cannot keep replacing that with lead because it's just too much of a target. So we're going to be looking at a different material to replace that with. But that will mean doing the whole perimeter of the rooms so that it matches. Another small job that's still outstanding at the moment is a section of downpipe that comes from the tower roof all the way down, discharges onto the first floor roof. That failed a few weeks ago, and we've had people in to look at replacing that, but the normal approach with scaffolding is not easy because the single-storey part of the building is not sufficiently strong to support scaffolding that then goes all the way up to the top. So they did come up with an idea of putting scaffolding down through the roof lights so that some support could be gained from the ground level. But I've got another plan, and that is to ask a steeplejack whether it could be repaired from the top, which in fact is how the clock was last repaired. So the plan is to get a steeplejack in, have a look at it, see whether it could be done basically from the tower roof, and have it repaired like that. It's a simple enough job. It's just the access that's the issue. Whilst all this has been happening here on the church site, obviously the PCC are also responsible for the maintenance of the other church properties, so including Rochester Avenue, where there are new tenants, and therefore some refurbishment work was necessary during the year. Homesdale Road, which is let through Hope into Action, and there's ongoing maintenance and refurbishment there. And a very small amount of work at St Paul's House over the road. Again, they suffered a water leak, an external water leak, back before Christmas, but that was fixed by Thames Water. So, to varying degrees, it's the income, obviously, from those three lots of properties is absolutely crucial to the work that this church can do. We would be in a very different position if we didn't have that money. So, although in a way it's a burden, maintaining these properties as well as the church, the net income that it produces is extremely valuable and does mean that we have the funds to do all the things that James talked about in his report. I just want to finish up by, first of all, saying a few thank yous, especially to James, because he still picks up a lot of the day-to-day bits and pieces around the church and the site because he's here. But I also want to say thank you to Helen Hackney, who looks after all the insurance liaison for us and obviously has been very busy these last couple of years. We have made an awful lot of insurance claims. So many, many thanks to Helen as well. I also want to mention Ed Tree, because Ed looks after the energy contracts for us, is brilliant at getting the best possible deals and playing one company off against another until he's sure he's got the best that's possible. And I've already mentioned Sarah and Janice for the work they've done on the monuments and tombs. Finally, I just want to finish on a sort of a very positive note, and that is that although there's clearly a lot of work to do in a site like this, and many of you know because you've been involved in it. I'm looking at Jill particularly. Many of you know because you've been involved in it in the past yourselves. It's very pleasing when visitors to the church, and indeed contractors coming on site, say to you, A, what a lovely building it is, but also how well it's being looked after. And clearly they're out and about and they're seeing other churches and making comparisons. And I think they do see that although there's always things that they're going to need doing, this place is looked after well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you, Tim, for all you do to look after this place. I was at Vocations Day yesterday in another church, and all the women's toilets overflowed. And with a realization of joy, I thought, I don't have to sort this out; it's someone else's problem. That feeling of liberty was a wonderful thing. So it's a lot to take on doing this space, and we're grateful for all you do. We're almost at the end of the meeting, so the only item we have left is any other business. That being said, shall we do this again in about a year's time? I declare the APCM closed.